Good morning and welcome to the Excel BI virtual chapter of PASS. I'm really excited today to have Mr. Excel himself, Bill Jelen, here to share his favorite Excel tips and tricks. Before we get started, there's just a few administrative things for the chapter itself we're going to review. The first thing here is the PASS Business Analytics Conference that's going to be held in April. So mark your calendars if this is the type of content that you like to learn about. We'll have much more of this in Santa Clara, California, April 20th to 22nd next year. As we start the session itself, we're going to be holding the questions till the end. You can type your questions in the bottom of the screen there. And if you do need to, a lot of folks sometimes have some trouble, maximize your screen. There's a little button there that you can do that to make it larger. We are going to record the session and replay it, so if you do have to leave early, no worries. We'll definitely have a recording of this session. Stay involved in PASS. There's other methods. You can follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook. We also have a hashtag. Feel free to tweet that you're on this session and remind other folks to join on in with the hashtag SQLPass or ExcelBIVC. And you can also follow and register with PASS at SQLPass.org. So our speaker today is Bill Jelen. It's Mr. Excel. He's MrExcel.com. He's an MVP, a Microsoft MVP, certified trainer, and author of 43 or over 43 books. I don't know how he does that. It's amazing. But he's written about Microsoft Excel, Power Pivot, and Power View. He also publishes a monthly Excel article for Strategy Finance magazine, and I'll also let Bill introduce himself as I pass over the presenter credentials to him.
All right, great. We're going to have some fun in the next hour. I'm going to show a lot of my favorite Excel tips and tricks, and well, actually just a lot of different tips and tricks. Let me show my screen. There we go. So I'll be working in Excel 2013 today. A lot of these tricks will work with Power Pivot or without Power Pivot. I tried to keep things that in case your data is in the data model and you're creating OLAP pivot tables instead of pivot cache pivot tables, the tips and tricks will still work. So my plan today, I'm going to cover some conditional formatting, data visualizations, how to take just boring black and white spreadsheets and really bring them to life in just a couple of clicks. We'll take a look at some pivot table tips and tricks, pivot table tips and tricks. Look at the new charting features in Excel 2013. I have a case study on Sparklines and how we can take data from the data model, create a pivot table in Excel, and then create a nice visualization on top of that using the Sparkline feature, and then just other tips and tricks as we go through. All right, so let's get started here. This first screen that you can see is a report of reject rates by hour and line. We have a manufacturing plant. Oh, that's great. Here we go. Hopefully the screen is back. We have a manufacturing plant, 5 manufacturing lines, and we measure reject rates for every hour for those various lines. And when you look at this, no one can really tell what's going on, which lines are having trouble, which lines aren't having trouble. But we have a great feature that came along starting in Excel 2007 on the Home tab. Just select your data, make sure not to include any grand totals, and I don't have grand totals or averages here. We go to conditional formatting, and then under color scales, there's 12 options there, although you can create infinite numbers of options, but the ones I use all the time are the first two, either from green, yellow, red, or red, yellow, green. Now in this case, reject rates are bad, so the higher numbers are bad, so I'm going to go with the red, yellow, green, the second one, and just, that was 3 clicks, right? Conditional formatting, color scales, and choose, and now we can very quickly see which lines are doing well and which lines are bad. Line 3 has had a problem the entire day. Line 1, they started out good, but as we got down towards the end, of the shift, they started to run into more problems. So that's a color scale, one of the new conditional formatting tools that came along starting in Excel 2007. I'm going to go on to the next worksheet, the data bar. So here we have 20 customers. They're not sorted in any particular sequence, and we want to call attention to the largest customers. Now you'll notice here that I've been careful to select just the customer data, not the grand total. And so we'll go to conditional formatting and then choose data bars. Now this is revenue, so for revenue I always use green, and just like that. So now the largest numbers get the largest swath of color, the smallest numbers get the smallest swath of color. So you give this to a non-financial manager, they're going to be able to look at that, and very quickly their eye is going to be drawn to the largest customers. Now I'm going to undo that. So Control Z to undo, and I'm going to reselect the data including the grand total just to show what would happen if you accidentally included the grand total. So conditional formatting, data bars, the same green fill. Now because the grand total has so much revenue and it has all of the revenue, it gets all of the green color, and all of the other customers get hardly anything at all. That's why it's really important that you select just the detailed data and not any summary data. All right, moving on. Next one, highlight entire row. So here we want to find the customer that has the largest amount of revenue, and we don't want to just highlight column B. We want to highlight both column B and column A. If it was just a matter of highlighting column B, well, that's already built in here in all of these highlight cells rules. We can find the, or top bottom rules, we can find the top 10 items and actually ask for the top 1. So I'll use the spin button here to change down to the top 1. Well, that's a really easy way to highlight the dollars or the revenue for that top 1 item, but it doesn't highlight the whole thing. And so we're going to go back to a feature that has been in conditional formatting since the beginning, Excel 97, but it was always really hidden, and it's still really, really hidden because it's not anywhere here in this drop-down. We would have to go to New Rule at the bottom, and it's the last setting in the dialog box called Use a Formula to determine which cells to format. And this one conditional formatting is really just the keys to all kinds of very flexible formatting. Anytime that you can create a formula that's going to be true or false, we can control the conditional formatting. All right, so that's where we're going to come. But it's always easier before you try and build the formula here in this box to build the formula once out in the spreadsheet, because you can actually see the results and see how they're going to work. All right, so we're going to build a formula that's going to refer to this range, A2 to B21, and it's going to be looking to see if the revenue in column B of this row is equal to the max revenue anywhere in the range. All right, so we're going to say equal B2, hit the equal sign, hit the left arrow. This goes back to the days of Lotus 1, 2, 3. I know a lot of people build their formulas with a mouse in Excel, but the mouse is a really slow way to go. And spreadsheet started, of course, with VisiCalc and then Multiplan. And Lotus 1, 2, 3 in the 80s was the spreadsheet that really Excel was battling when Lotus and Excel were battling for market share. So a lot of things in Excel are there because they were there in Lotus. And Lotus was a DOS-based spreadsheet. We had no mouse at all. All we had were the arrow keys. And so if you want to build a formula, the quickest way to build the formula is to use the arrow key. So I type the equal sign, left arrow, and that now points to B2. And I want to see if that's equal to the max. Now here I am going to grab the mouse and select this entire range, B2 to 21. I want to see if the value in this cell is equal to the largest value in the entire range. Okay, but as I copy that formula down, the B2 definitely needs to move to B3, B4, B5. But that range, the B2 to B21, that range has to stay put. I don't want it to move down a row and another row and another row and another row. And so this in Excel is something called an absolute reference. Right now, B2 to B21 is a relative reference. As we copy it down, it will change as it copies down. But if at this point we need to put 4 dollar signs in, a dollar sign before the B, a dollar sign before the 2, a dollar sign before the second B, before the 21, and the fast way to do that is to press the F4 key. So right now the flashing insertion point is next to that reference. Press F4. It puts all the dollar signs in for us. All right, so we want to see if the value in this row, column B, is equal to the max of B2 to B21. And that's going to evaluate to either true or false, which is perfect. That's exactly what we need. Now, that would work great if I was just applying this to column B, but I also need to apply it to column A. So I'm going to put a single dollar sign, just $1 right there before that B to say, hey, go look at the revenue column. Go look at column B in this row. All right, so we'll copy that down, and that largest one is true, and I should see no other trues all the way down. And just to do a little test here, I'll put in 50,000, and we should see that that true at the top in C2 changes to a false, and the true down here in row 12, or if the false in row 12 changed to a true. All right, so we're always building a formula that's going to work from the point of view of the top left cell in the spreadsheet. I'm going to copy that formula to the clipboard now, so Control-C. It's really funny in Excel, when you copy a cell, that's not copying the formula, it's copying all kinds of other stuff. If you want to copy that formula, you have to click into the formula bar and highlight the value up in the formula bar, and then Control-C to get that. All right, so we're going to select our whole range here, and we're going to go into conditional formatting, new rule, use a formula, and the formula, I'm going to paste Control-V. Excel pros, actually anyone who uses Excel, hates this dialog box. This dialog box is one of the more evil dialog boxes in the entire program, because sometimes we'll realize that we typed something incorrectly, and so we might click in and we click at the wrong spot, and we want to use the left arrow key or the right arrow key. And this dialog box, you see that, is actually inserting cell references as I move around. It's one of the most maddening things in the whole world. If you've ever been stung by that, the beautiful trick down here in the lower left-hand corner of the spreadsheet, it says that we're in enter mode. If I press the F2 key, that changes to edit mode, and now I'm allowed to use the right arrow and left arrow with impunity. It works just fine. So that would drive me crazy for years until finally someone said, oh no, it's F2. And I was like, oh wow, that is just, will save me a lot of hassle. All right, so this is the largest customer. I'm going to go with the bright green for that largest customer. Maybe even change the font color to a nice white color. All right, click OK, click OK. So now the entire row is being highlighted, and if we have another customer that becomes number 1, it will change. Of course, this formula out here, that was just a temporary formula. We don't need that formula anymore. We can just get rid of that formula. So far we've talked about the color scale. We've talked about the data bar, the little in-cell bar charts. The one that I'm not a big fan of is the icon set. And I realize that Power Pivot sort of has this KPI thing that uses the same icon sets that we have here. The icon set, I remember this going back to, I was using Essbase back in the 90s. It was an add-in for Excel, and they had icon sets. So the idea here is the largest numbers are going to get, for example, maybe the green traffic light, the medium numbers, the yellow traffic light, and then the smallest numbers, the red traffic light. Although these traffic lights, if you're colorblind, you can't tell the difference, so at least choose the different shapes there. And there's 21 different things to choose from. I'm a big fan of the up, neutral, and down sometimes, or if I'm creating reports for people who are 22 and under, I go with the cell phone power bars because they can seem to understand that one. All right, we'll choose our shapes there. The reason I don't like icon sets is the icon set is always plastered against the left edge of the cell, and of course, in accounting, our numbers are always against the right edge of the cell because that's the way that they taught us to do it. And so this 82 in this green circle appeared to be too close to me, and I can't tell which icon applies to which number. For the first couple of weeks, I was tempted to actually come in and center the numbers, but that really bothers me. We shouldn't center numbers. That's just wrong. Like your manager, the CFO is not going to accept numbers that are centered. Numbers have to be right aligned. That's just the way it's always been. So I'm going to go back to the right alignment, but there's a cool trick here next to those options called decrease and increase indent. So I'm actually going to increase the indent from the right edge. And you see that moves those numbers closer to the icon set. So it kind of alleviates the problem that we had with the icon being closer to the next number. All right, so far we've just used the default, but there's many more options. Let's say that I only wanted to highlight the cells that were greater than 90. When I apply the conditional formatting and I choose an icon set, I'll go with the 3 stars here, the gold star, the half star, and the white star. They apply some sort of a formula to determine which cells get which color. But I only want to highlight with the gold star anything over 90, and everything else gets no star at all. So once I have the default formatting, we can go back into conditional formatting and then manage rules. All right, so there's our one rule that we've set up, and I'm going to say that I want to edit that rule. And you see we actually have a whole bunch of choices here. Right now they're using 67% and 33%, but I can say, no, this should be an absolute number. I want to be able to type a number in there. And so the gold star is for greater than or equal to 90. And then for everything else, I actually don't want any icon at all. So I'll open these drop downs and choose no cell icon. And then the next drop down and choose no cell icon. All right, and click OK. Now I just want to come back here and look. We have four choices: number, percent, formula, percentile. I'm going to explain percent and percentile in a second. I just want to show you that those are the options that we have. So we click OK and click OK. All right, and now only the numbers greater than 90 have the gold star. Everything else gets no icon at all. You could actually, using conditional formatting, choose one of the icon sets that would have 5 options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then go in and manage rules and come up with some crazy icon set that might have the gold star and then the cell phone power bar and then this and that and that. I'm not sure that would ever make sense, but it is possible to do it in case you would ever have some reason to do that. Can you create other icons? No, that's really frustrating. We were kind of intrigued when Excel 2007 introduced the icon sets, and then 2010 gave us a few new ones. They gave us the up, flat, and down, and they gave us the stars, and we said, all right, let's create this in Excel 2010 and go back to Excel 2007 and see if they've embedded the graphics there so that way Excel 2007 would understand it. And then we'd be able to use that as a hack to figure out how to put our own icons in. But it never worked. The icons just don't appear back in Excel 2007. So someday we're going to figure that one out. But right now, that's just been elusive, let's say. All right, so let's talk about percentile versus percent. So here, I have numbers from 1 to 100, and I apply the icon set with 3 icons, and you can see it just splits where we would expect it to split, 33 and 67. But that's because I have every number equally represented. Over here, the default is something called percent, and you can see that I went from 1 to 99, but it is heavily weighted towards the lower end. They still take that range. They take the largest value, 99, minus the smallest value, 1, and split it into 3 groups. So basically 1 to 33, 33 to 66, actually, in this case, because I'm at 99. And they just apply the icons based on those rules, all right, which I guess could make sense. But sometimes you might want to make sure that the icons are evenly distributed. So then you would change from percent to percentile. With percentile, 1/3 of the icons get the red, 1/3 get yellow, and 1/3 get green, no matter how the numbers are distributed. So your call there which one you want. Just be aware that the options are there to go in and change those. All right, I'm going to close that file. Don't save. Just a couple of real basic tricks. I'm creating a new spreadsheet with Control-N, N for new. Lots of times when we have a brand new spreadsheet, of course, we need headings to go down the left-hand side or across the top, and I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this trick. Right? So you type January in cell A1. If I want those month names to go down the left-hand side, all I have to do is grab the little fill handle, the square dot in the lower right-hand corner, and drag that handle down 12 rows, and it will type the month names for me. This works as well with days of the week, so I can type Monday, grab the fill handle and drag, and they type the month names. If I go too far past the 7th cell, they just wrap around and start creating those again. Q1, they understand that that's a quarter, and then after the 4th quarter, we're going to go back to Q1. They let us spell quarter just about any way you can imagine. So grab the fill handle and drag. It'll do 2nd, 3rd, 4th, but then go back to 1st quarter. This works equally well with dates, so I'm going to put in today's date. That's Control semicolon gives me today's date. How do you remember Control semicolon? The actual shortcut key is to put in the current time is Control colon. So Control Shift colon will give you the current time, but just unshift that to get the current date. So 10/16, grab the fill handle and drag, and it fills in the next day, the next day, the next day. Right? Beautiful. If you happen to work in a place where you work just Monday through Friday dates, so I'm actually going to change this to a long date so we can see that today is Thursday. And you want to fill in just the work week. Oh, this is a great trick. I'm going to right-click and drag, right-click and drag. And when I let go, a new box pops out on the right-hand side. So I right-click the fill handle, I drag. Now I have an option to fill days, which is the default. Fill weekdays, which only gives me Monday through Friday dates. Fill months, which would give me the 16th of every month. And fill years, which would give me October 16th of every year. So I'm going to fill weekdays, and we get just those Monday through Friday dates. See the Wednesdays here, they don't fit. That's because the column is not wide enough for that value. So anytime you have dates or numeric data, Excel gives us the hash signs. Lots of times people will come out here to the boundary between column F and G up at the top, and they'll drag to a new spot. But if you just double-click, Excel will figure out where the longest value in the column is and make it wide enough for that value. All right, so Excel knows all of those things that it can extend, but the one that frustrates everybody is if you put in the number 1 and grab the fill handle and drag. Any rational person would think that you're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But for some reason, Excel cannot figure out that the next number should be 2. We just get 1s all the way down. And I hear lots of workarounds. People say, well, hey, put in the 1 and the 2. Give it a pattern. Give it a pattern, and then once you've given it a pattern, grab the fill handle and drag, and it will fill in 3, 4, 5, 6. But my argument there is I didn't have to type January and February. I didn't have to type Monday and Tuesday. I just had to type Monday. So the great trick here is to put in the number 1, and then for whatever reason, I have no idea why they figured that this would be important, we can hold down the Control key, and when we hold down the Control key and drag, it will automatically count 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One last trick in this area before I move on, and this is a really good trick. I used to work for a company, and we had 3 regions. We had the East region, we had the Central region, and we had the West region. And at the company, the rule was that all of the reports would always have the East region first, and then the Central region, and then the West region. And there's no way to sort this data properly into East, Central, and West. Now, one of the great things about Power Pivot is we can actually say, hey, we want this column, East, Central, West, to be sorted by this other column where we could put in the numbers 1-East, 2-Central, 3-West. But we don't really have that in Excel. But the amazing thing that we have is we can teach Excel this list. And so what you would do is type the list in the proper sequence and then select the list. Now, if you happen to be back in Excel 2007, you would go to File and then Excel Options. It's right here in the middle of the screen. But everyone else, we're going to go to the Options in the lower left-hand corner. And again, back in Excel 2007, the button I'm looking for is called Edit Custom Lists, and it's right here in the first screen. But starting in Excel 2010, they moved it to the Advanced tab. And not anywhere near the top of the Advanced tab. You have to scroll almost to the bottom. I always say it's 83% of the way down. There is our button for Edit Custom Lists. So I'll choose Edit Custom Lists, and we go to this nice little dialog box that's been around for a long time. You'll see that this is actually where they store Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, January, February, March, and a few other things that I've memorized along the way. And you'll see that I've actually already memorized East, Central, West as a custom list on this computer. So normally you would select that range and click Import. You only have to do that once, and then every time that you open any workbook on this computer, you can do 2 things. The first thing you can do is use the custom list to fill, so you can type East, grab the fill handle and drag, and it will fill that. But then if you need to sort, so I'm just going to create some fake data here. I am the king of fake data. With all those books I've written, I have so many ways to create fake data. So ran between, if by the way you ever have to create next year's budget and you don't have time to create the budget, ran between is just a great way to do that. All right, so that was a joke. All right, so data. I'm going to go to the Data tab. I'm going to sort, and I want to say I want to sort by column M, the region column, but I'm not going to sort A to Z. Any of the custom lists that we've defined are available here in this order drop-down. So in the order drop-down, I'm going to say, hey, change this to East, Central, and West. Click OK. Click OK. And there we go. The East region comes to the top, and then the Central region, and then the West region. Great, great little trick. I remember I actually went to the VP of Sales, and I said, you know, hey, you'd make my life a lot simpler if you would rename that Central region to be Middle. And he just laughed at me and said, go away. So I was always just manually copying and pasting the things into the right order. If I would have known this trick back then as a data analyst, life would have been so much easier. All right, closing this. Let's take a look at some pivot table examples. Pivot tables are one of my favorite features in Excel, whether you're using Power Pivot or not. I was a data analyst before before pivot tables came along. Boy, life was just miserable to try and create reports. Now here I have data. This is 563 records. It's just a single flat data file: region, product, date, customer, quantity, revenue, cost of goods sold, and profit. But I have taken that data and run it through Power Pivot, just so that way, in case your data isn't Power Pivot, which it probably is, you're going to have the same experience that I'm having right now. So we'll create a pivot table. Click OK. And let's just create a simple report here with customer going down the side. And I understand I should create a DAX measure for revenue, but I'm just going to create the implicit measure. All right, so there's our pivot table. And one of the things about pivot tables, we almost always have a grand total at the bottom. I assume that down here, although my screen is just a little bit too small, grand total. So if we would try and apply a data bar to this pivot table, the grand total is going to cause problems because it is way too large. All right, so we can select the range and go back to the Home tab and apply conditional formatting, data bars, and green. And you see, as we expected, everything is way too small. But the beautiful thing is those conditional formatting, if we go into Manage Rules and then edit the rule, because we're inside of a pivot table, we have this new section at the top that is not there when you're just creating conditional formatting from regular cells. And here we can say that we want to just do this for all cells showing sum of revenue for customer. Click OK, click OK, and now you see that our customers have the right data bars and the grand total is not there. And even if we would drop something new in, so for example, if I would add product here above customer, it still knows not to add the data bars to the ABC subtotals. All right, a couple more pivot table tips and tricks. This whole concept here of having two different fields in column B, this is the compact layout. Pivot tables never did this before Excel 2007, and it was added to Excel 2007. I understand it was a lot of work. I mean, Rob Colley lives right up the road from me, and we occasionally go out for a beer. And he was on the team that helped design this. And Rob loves this feature, and I think this feature is horrible because you are mixing product name and customer name in the same column. So every time that I create a pivot table, I come back here to the Design tab, the second tab, where they offer something called Report Layout. And the compact form is the default. And to my chagrin, there's no way to make that not be the default. Every time we create a pivot table, we're going to get compact form, but I always come here and change it to tabular form. And in tabular form, I actually now have each field gets its own column, which is the way that it should be. Every field should have its own column. So we have products in column A, customer, or products in B, customer in C. Now, how about these blanks here? Those blanks are just horrible. If we come to report layout, and this is only in Excel 2010 and newer, there's a setting for repeat all item labels. And so now it fills in those blank cells with the proper value. Boy, if there was a button somewhere in Excel that would let me make that be the default pivot table, life would be so much easier. Oh, and actually with Power Pivot, we can choose the flattened pivot table, which replicates this pretty well. All right, so I'm going to take the product field out for now. We have customers down the left-hand side. The customers are presented alphabetically, and I would like to see the largest customers at the top. All right, now, there's two ways to do this. The first way is to go to the customer drop-down, and under More Sort Options, we can say that we want this data sorted descending based on sum of revenue. But, starting in Excel, actually in Excel 2010, we have to thank the Excel team. They understand now that if we just come to the sum of revenue column, go to the Data tab and choose Z to A to sort descending. They actually go through and set up that rule for us. So if we go back in and look under More Sort Options, they've now chosen that setting, even though I didn't have to go through the 8 clicks to go through and do that. This data set is a small data set, 26 customers, right? In real life, there's hundreds of customers or thousands of customers. And the thing, I used to work in a department where we were producing reports for the Vice President of Sales. He is a great guy, but he does not have a long attention span. I don't know if your Vice President of Sales is the same way, but I could keep his attention for maybe one page. actually, he's just said, just give me the top 10, right? I don't need to see everything else. And so I'm going to scroll down here just a little bit and show that the total revenue is $6.7 million. And there's an annoying feature in pivot tables that I've had to deal with since the beginning, that if we come here to the customer dropdown and go to value filters, there is a setting called top 10, like that. And it offers top or bottom, 10, 5, 20, 7, whatever you need. So I can change this to the top 5. And remember, we were 6.7 million before I did this filter. Click OK. All right, and so they very nicely show me just the top 5 customers. That's great. But my grand total now changed, right? So the VP of Sales freaks out, right? Because his quota was 6 million, and he knows he beat the quota. But now I'm producing a report that shows only 3.5 million. And this is another great advantage of Power Pivot. Back here in the Design tab, underneath subtotals, there is a setting that in all regular pivot tables, every regular Excel analyst who doesn't run their Excel data through Power Pivot comes here to this dropdown, and this item, include filtered items and totals, is grayed out. Right? We've seen it for 15 years, and we've never been able to use it. Now that I run the data through Power Pivot, I'm allowed to choose this, and the beautiful thing is it now shows me the grand total of everybody. Puts a little asterisk there to say, hey, you know, it's including things you can't see, but that is just a really, really good feature. It's buried back here on the Design tab where no one would ever find it. But a nice improvement to show the top 5 and then the revenue from everybody. All right, we'll come back to pivot tables, but I want to show you some of the cool charting improvements that we have starting in Excel 2013. All right, first thing, people will say, you know, I don't know what type of chart to create. What's the best type of chart to create from this data? And one nice thing that we have is that starting in Excel 2013, they offer this great big recommended charts, right? So while you can choose any chart type you want from the rest of the drop-downs, the recommended charts is, you know, they give you ideas. And here in this case, they're giving me 4 different ideas, and I can click and see what the column chart would look like, the area chart, the stacked column chart. And in fact, the second one is the one that I create all the time. That's the one I've been creating for the last 25 years. But every once in a while, I still bounce in here, and they'll come up with an idea, a way to present that data that is something I've never thought of before. And so, you know, even if you know what you want, it's good to come into recommended charts and see what they're offering. And if you need to create something else that's not in here at all, you can always go to all charts and, you know, create any of the various. Oh, some of those are hideous. Wow. Okay. But you know, in this particular case, that gets me to where I want to go. So we have our chart. They put the legend at the bottom. I would prefer to have the legend at the top. You have to admit the words chart title are the worst possible title in the entire world because they have to be changed every single time. You know, just call it sales, call it revenue, call it something, and you'll be right once in a while. My trick here for the chart title is if you just click once and start to type something, you can't see what you're typing in the chart title. It only appears up in the formula bar above the spreadsheet, which confuses people. So you actually have to come and do something I didn't even know was a thing. But if you go to the chart title and not single click, not double click, if you triple click, and you can actually type right in the chart. So a triple click in order to change that chart title. All right, next thing we have in Excel 2013, we've always had absolute control on the Format tab, and there used to be a Layout tab in Excel 2010 to go through and try and make the perfect chart. But using the paintbrush icon, they've come up with 153 different chart styles, and you only get 10 for each chart type that are really, really clever chart styles. So there's the second one, where they've moved the legend to the top where I want it to be. They also took the data labels, which would have been way too wide, and they turned them sideways. All right, now, that's brilliant. And when I say brilliant, that means, darn, I never thought of that myself. I went back to Excel 2010, and sure enough, everything that they've done here, I could have done in Excel 2010. I just wasn't smart enough to think to do it. And then I also discovered that the things that they've done here with a single click often would take dozens and dozens of clicks in Excel 2010. So because I'm Mr. Excel, I would always go through and see if I could do this stuff back in Excel 2010. Did they add any new features? No, they added no new features. Everything was something that we could do in Excel 2010. It would just take me 50 or 60 clicks, like even the sales by region, putting those all in caps. That was buried, but I managed to figure out where the heck it was hidden in Excel 2010 if I would ever need to do it. But I guess why would I go do 53 clicks in Excel 2010 when Excel 2013 will let me do that very easily. All right, so there's our chart. One bad thing here is the colors. I had a manager once, he would flip out if I ever used red in a revenue chart. Never use red. Red is bad. All right, so all the colors that they're giving us here, actually I guess they have some other colors that might have gotten rid of the red. But let's just say that everything is good except for the red. We want to change that one color. Yeah, it's back in the Format tab under Shape Fill, and we can choose a different color so your manager doesn't freak out over the red. All right, another great new feature. Here is a data set that is set up horribly for charting because someone in the accounting department, I'm sure, added quarterly subtotals. All right. Well, that's not good. We need data that's not going to have the quarterly subtotals. So almost every Excel person who would have to create this chart would create a second copy of the data down below that gets rid of the quarterly subtotals. But now in Excel 2013, we can just create the chart with the totals right there. All right, and you can tell it's really spiky, right? It's going to look horrible, all right, because of those quarterly totals. But this funnel, the funnel is brand new in Excel 2013, and we can go into the funnel and say, hey, don't show me quarter 1, don't show me quarter 2, don't show me quarter 3, and don't show me quarter 4. And so now I don't have to create this second mirror version of the data. I can just create a nice data set and use the funnel to get rid of the various items. A couple more things here. This isn't new in Excel 2013, but things that I would do all the time. All of those points being the same color drive me a little bit crazy. The chart looks really boring. So I like to come in here and press Control-1 or double-click where we get over to our Format Data Series, and I'm going to go to the Paint bucket and then Open Fill, and then this great thing called Vary Colors by Point will just apply a different color to every chart. All right, so if you just have a monochromatic chart and you want to add some color, that's an easy way to go. The other thing that I'll do here is that these columns are really, really narrow, and there's no setting that says, hey, make the columns wider, but there is a setting that says that controls the gaps, so the gaps between the columns. If you make the gap width narrower, then the columns themselves become larger. I mean, there's really no reason to have all those big gaps between there. And actually, depending on your numbers, you might actually have more chance for the column labels to fit the wider you make those columns. This whole thing over here with the pane and the series options and these icons, yeah, if you hate this, if you can't find what you need, so do we. It's hideous. It used to be organized in a different way. The thing I found is when I come here, the first thing I look for is the 3-column chart, and most of the time what I need is there. But then after that, it's just a lot of swearing and going through all the different options. So boy, it'd be nice if they somehow found a way to simplify that. All right, next charting example. Here we have data. We're trying to show things with 2 different orders of magnitude. I have revenue and profit, which are in millions, and then gross profit percent, which is in percentages. And normally when you try and create this chart, the gross profit percent is way too small. No one will be able to see it on the chart. It'll show up in the legend. But starting in Excel 2013, they've changed the user interface for this. And while this normally would take me 5 minutes to explain it, it's just so beautiful. Right here in recommended charts, they can tell instantly what would make this look best. And the first recommended chart is a combo chart with revenue and profit tied to the left axis and the gross profit percent tied to the right axis. So I don't even have to go through and change everything, but just to show you what the new UI looks like, if I would choose combo, for every series, in this case revenue, profit, and profit percent, I get to choose what type of a chart and whether or not it's on the first axis or the secondary axis. All right, so if for some reason the recommended charts can't figure out your data, which items are small and need to be on the second chart, you can come into this brand new UI in Excel 2013 and create the chart so that we can see both gross profit percent and the large numbers, revenue and profit. All right, I'm going to create a chart from this data. So insert chart. I'm going to go with the column chart instead of the recommended line chart. We'll click OK. And I want to add notes. I mean, clearly something's happened here in June and something's happened in December. And so I want to add some explanatory text. And to do that, I'm going to use a data label. So we'll come to the plus sign and choose data labels, all right, which by default just gives us the values in the cells. But then I'm going to click the right triangle over here and go to more options. All right, so now that I'm in the data label options, again, we'll go to the 3-column chart to label options. And we've had these options before. We're going to choose series name or category name or value. But the brand new thing in Excel 2013 is value from cells. Value from cells. Now, we've always been able to do this using a free add-in from Rob Bobby, an Excel MVP, called the Chart Labeler. And Microsoft, the Excel would always say, well, the Excel team would say, well, we don't need to add this to Excel because everyone's just using Rob's add-in. Well, they finally decided to add it to Excel. The thing is, you cannot uncheck value first. You have to add something like value from cells and then specify where the value from cells are. Click OK. So now we have a really bad label with both the numbers and the note, and then you can uncheck value. Kind of a really weird bug, the way that you have to add something. You have to have two things before you can uncheck. If you uncheck the first one, then the labels just go away and it doesn't work. So that's a nice feature. You might have formulas there that are identifying the largest cell or the smallest cell or something like that. All right, last chart example, and this one's crazy. This is, what do I have here? I think I have 560 rows of data. It's detailed data. Normally, you would have to create a pivot table before you tried to create a chart from this data. But Excel 2013 is all about protecting people. I don't want to use the term clueless people. It's about protecting clueless people from themselves. So if someone would come here and try and create a chart from this data without creating a pivot table first, when they go to Insert Recommended Charts, all of the charts that they're recommending, you'll see this icon. These are actually pivot charts that are getting created. All right, so someone comes here, they just have really ugly data. They don't know how to create a pivot table. Excel will create the pivot table for them and create a pivot chart. Now, the downside to this is they now have a pivot table. All right, so you take someone who is brand new to Excel. They don't know anything about pivot tables. They don't know what pivot charts are. They went in through the UI, Excel recommended this, and now they have a pivot table, and what are they going to do with it? Well, they're going to have to come find someone who has a clue what a pivot table is, so that way they can help them out of that situation. But it's nice. I mean, I can understand where someone completely new to Excel, they have no one around, they fall into this data, and then it will get them to some sort of an analysis that will be accurate. So, there you go. All right, my last example is creating Sparklines, and I'm going to create Sparklines here on top of data that comes from Power Pivot. And so this is a data set that I actually got out at the MVP Summit a few years ago. It's a database that's publicly available online. It's the Hot 100, going back to 1890 or something like that. So the Billboard Hot 100. And I've simplified the data. The real data is almost 100,000 rows, but I didn't want to crash my computer here during the webinar. So this is just the artists who have been in the top 10 for any given year. And I've run this data through Power Pivot, but the first thing I have to do is I need to create a lookup table that's going to be used in my analysis. And that lookup table is only going to live as a pivot table for about a minute. I'm going to use a pivot table as a means to an end. So in this particular case, I'm going to create a pivot table just here from the Excel data because it's not going to stay as a pivot table. It's just a great way to summarize this data, and then it won't be a pivot table after I'm done. So I'm going to put artist down the left-hand side. I'm going to put year going across. And then this weeks field is the number of weeks that they were on the chart. And if they had two songs on the chart, let's say the first song was on the chart for 20 weeks and the second song was on the chart for 3 weeks, it will add up to 23. So I'm going to drag that down to the chart values, sum of weeks. Right now, it looks like nothing happened there, but that's because all of these artists, 10,000 Maniacs, had nothing on the chart in the 1890s. All right, so we're just getting these blanks. I would have to scroll out here to the right before we start to see the data that appears. And this is one of those things that really annoys me about pivot tables is if they have no data for that particular combination of artist and year, instead of putting a 0 there like they really should do, they give us an empty cell. And in every case, my entire spreadsheet life up until this morning, I swear at Microsoft because they don't put a 0 there. But in this particular case, today, I'm really happy they didn't put a 0 there because I get to go to Excel options. And in this cell where I say for empty cells show, and I would type a 0, I'm actually going to do something tricky. I'm going to put a -1 because the win-loss sparkline that I'm going to create at the end needs -1s in order to create the negative sparkline. The, hey, there was no data for this year, it needs a -1. So in this is the first, it's a red letter day. October 16, 2014 is the first time I've ever appreciated the fact that they leave that data empty. So thank you, Microsoft. I'm sorry that I swore at you every other time. Report layout, we're going to go back to tabular form. Why? Just because I hate compact form that much. All right. And then this is a really large data set. I don't need it to live as a pivot table anymore. The best way to make it not be a pivot table is to select the whole data set. Actually, I'm going to select the whole worksheet. I'm going to copy, and then under paste, choose paste values. All right, that gets rid of the pivot cache, and now I just have a nice static data set. I'm allowed to do anything I want to it. Later on, I'm going to do some VLOOKUPs back into this data. All right, so lots of times a pivot table is just a means. It's just a stepping stone. Right, we're just trying to get somewhere, create a quick pivot table, convert it from pivot tables to values, and now we've created our own lookup table. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to Power Pivot. Manage. In real life, this data set has 5 tables. I've tried to simplify it down to just the tables that I need here. We'll create a pivot table from this data on a new sheet. And what I want to do is I want to see the top artists for any period in time. So under the Data tab, I'm going to add artists to the left-hand side. And then I want to see the number of weeks. This is actually song weeks if you get right down to it. All right, so this is all dates, all decades, the whole bit. You can see, who the top artists were. But I really don't need to see things alphabetically, especially here with Tennessee Ernie Ford and Weird Al Yankovic sorting to the top all the time because Excel thinks that a quote comes before the number 1. So we're going to go into our setting here, more sort options, and say sort descending based on the sum of weeks. Click OK. All right, so there you go. Bing Crosby, Aretha Franklin, Al Jolson, Billy Murray, Andrew Sisters, Aerosmith. I feel bad I have to get down to row 9 before I actually can identify someone that I know, but there's our data. And it's going to be a lot of records, hundreds and hundreds of different artists that are going to appear, way too many to show up in the chart that I'm envisioning that I want to create. So again, I'm going to use that top 10 feature under value filters and the top 10 items based on sum of weeks. All right, so now for this pivot table is showing me the top 10 artists for that period in time. But the beautiful thing that we can do is we can take any other field here in our data set, and I happen to have a field called decade, and I can create a slicer, and that slicer will allow me to see this report for any decade. Who were the top 10 artists for that decade? So on the Analyze tab, I'm going to insert a slicer and choose all, choose decade, click OK. All right, we get the default ugly slicer right in the center of the screen. That's the way that every slicer is created. Center of the screen, ugly, 1 column. All right, so we come back here to columns, figure out something that's going to look better. I'll resize the slicer. It'd be nice if I could get it all in 2 rows. Boy, if it wasn't for the 1890s, I almost want to get rid of the 1890s data because then it would fit really well. Maybe we'll go to 7 columns, make it wider. All right, so now I'm going to be able to start to create some interesting reports because I can say, let's narrow this down to 1 decade, the 1970s, and Aretha Franklin, Al Green, ABBA, Anne Murray, Alice Cooper, Fifth Dimension. Go to the 80s, and I get a new report, air supply 38 special. I go to the 2010s, and it's going to be filled with people I've never heard of before, right? Yes, okay. Or you can even do things like choose 1960 and 1970 and see that, you know, the combination of those two. But, you know, this still isn't that interesting. I want to create something more interesting. And so above my pivot table, I'm going to insert a bunch of rows. And I'm going to build a report up here at the top. And it's going to be called, we're going to have artist. Actually, I want to go to row 3, artist. And while the pivot table is doing all kinds of great magic, this is just going to be a regular old Excel spreadsheet. And this regular old Excel spreadsheet is going to use a formula to grab whatever value is there. So I type the equal sign, I use the mouse, I click on cell A or B22, and I press enter, and I'm going to copy those 10 formulas down. And now the slicer is now making these formulas automatically change. All right, now I'm sure the screen refresh is way too slow, but one annoying thing that's happening here is as I choose from a different decade, the data in column E is moving right or left. It's not that it's moving from column E, it's that the darn pivot table is resizing every single time. This is a very annoying feature. I'm going to come back to the pivot table. On the Analyze tab, I'm going to click Options, and there's a great checkbox that says Auto Fit Column Width on Update. It's great in that you can turn that off. All right, so now I can make columns B and C be some column width, and I don't have to worry about them changing as I change my data from month or decade to decade. Everything just stays exactly where I want it to be. All right, so I'm going to create a sparkline here. I want to for any decade, so let's say we choose the 1980s, we see these top 10 artists, and I want to see what their staying power was. How long were they actually on the chart? And so I'm going to create this massive table that's going to be outside of view. No one will ever be able to see this, but right now I'm going to build it in view. So I'm going to put the year 1890 in cell I1, and then to the right of it, equal that cell plus 1. And I'm going to drag that, or actually copy 150 rows to the right. All right, I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to wait for the screen to refresh. I want you to look on the right-hand side of the screen. Underneath column DW, hopefully you're seeing that little tooltip that says 1R times 118C. Anytime that you start selecting a range, that for the first 10 cells appears up in the name box in the top left, but then after that it appears near the end of the selection. And so if you're trying to figure out how many years you need to go, I think I need to go 122 years and paste. You can make sure that it goes out far enough. All right, so using that little tooltip, great insider secret there for figuring out the answer. All right, so for every artist that's over there in column E, I need to pull that data, the data that's going to be used for the sparkline, to tell us whether or not they had something in that particular year. And normally this would be a VLOOKUP. However, I have 120 columns times 10, that's 1,200 VLOOKUPs. This thing would just start to crank so slowly. So I'm not going to use VLOOKUP today. Instead, I'm going to use an amazing little feature called Match. Match is like VLOOKUP. So it says, hey, go find air supply in, I'm going to go back to my lookup table here, in that data in column A. Notice that does not have to be sorted. I'll press F4 to lock that down, comma 0 because I want an exact match. And what it does, all right, did something wrong. Equal match. Go find air supply. In our data, comma 0. There we go. All right, so the 145. What is 145? Match does the same thing a VLOOKUP does, but it tells us where the item is located in the list. All right, so air supply is the 145th artist, 38 specialist, the 9th artist. These functions take as long as a VLOOKUP would take, right? So they're expensive, but I'm only doing 10 of those functions, and then from there on out, I'm doing an index, the index function. The index function says, hey, I have a whole bunch of answers back here on the sheet function. And I'm going to go be very careful to go to the 1890 sheet. I'll select that same range, not including the grand total. I'll press F4, and then I need to point to a particular row. And I'm going to hard code 145 there just to get back so that I can see the whole spreadsheet. It's really annoying if I would go back and click on sheet 2 while I'm building that formula. They would have inserted the sheet name, which bothers me. So, all right, so right there, H4, that's going to work fine in column I, but I need to lock it down to just column H. So I'm going to press F4 not once, which gives me both dollar signs, not twice, which locks down just the row, but one more time. And we will see for those people that none of them had any hits in 1890. But I'll copy that data across. All right, and so now we have 1,200 index functions. And those 1,200 index functions are going to operate very quickly using these 10 match functions right here. All right, so finally got to the payoff of this whole thing. I'm going to create an analysis here that shows for every single year whether or not the artist had a hit in that year. And I want that analysis to go right here in column F. So it's under Insert, and then a win-loss sparkline. They want to know where the data is. The data is this series of minus ones and positive numbers over here. Click OK. And we'll scroll back for the reveal. All right, I'm running out of time. I did something wrong. So I'm going to come back to the one that has it finished. All right. Now, what we just created on the other spreadsheet, we end up with either a downward marker or an upward marker. Downward marker for the negative values, upward marker for the items that had data. How did I get from that ugly spreadsheet that I just was to here? Well, the first thing I did is I had to make this column really, really wide because a sparkline only fills a single cell. So by making that column wide, I actually get to stretch it out and see exactly where everyone falls. All right, so here I'm looking at 1980. These are the answers, and you can see that some of the top stars from the 1980s actually have been going back and had hits, for example, Elton John, all of the 70s through the 90s and even into the 2000s. So for any given time period, the data is going back to the data model, pulling the pivot table, which is down below. No one will ever see that pivot table. And then using just regular old Excel formulas here and match and index off to the right in order to drive this sparkline. A couple of tricks I had to do here to get the lines in. Those are just drawing objects, so under Insert and then a line, I created a line. Once you create the line, you can change the color of the line. Just choose one, go to the Format tab, Shape Outline. You can add dashes. You can change the color. Once you get the first line in, hold down Control and drag the line across to the right spot. The labels up there, those are actually tiny little text boxes that I created and position them above each area. All right, so this doesn't look like Excel. This is, but if you would hide the ribbon, if you would publish this to Excel Online, people can interact with the slicer and get this beautiful analysis that's all coming from Power Pivot behind the scenes, but we're not dealing with the ugly pivot table data. We're making it into something a lot more interesting. All right, there you go. Lots of different Excel tips and tricks, kind of running the gamut. Any questions?
So, Bill, this was phenomenal. I'm blown away. I've learned a lot. Jen Sturrup mentioned she learned a lot. Other folks are sending in not questions, but just comments. They learned. It was a great, great session. So I don't see any actual questions, but we just want to thank you so much. And all these little tips, compelling. I didn't realize how much I didn't know. It's awesome.
Excellent. That's great. All right. So hey, one plug, and this is all free. If you ever are banging your head against an Excel question, if you can't figure out how to do something in Excel, go to MrExcel.com. In the left navigation there's something called the message board. We started this back in 2001. You have to register. It's free to register. You can post your question there. Collectively, The community of Mr. Excel answers 30,000 Excel questions a year. It's all absolutely free. Post your question with a really good title. Expect a clarifying question, but usually within a half an hour someone will come back and get your answer. So anytime that you're just banging your head against the wall, there's usually a way to do it. And so remember the message board at Mr. Excel will, just an amazing community there of people who are a lot smarter than I am as far as Excel goes. And they've solved, I look at things and say, oh, there's no way to do that. And an hour later, someone comes in with the just amazing formula or whatever that solves the problem. So that's all free.
It's probably the king tip of them all. So hopefully Mr. Underwood actually joined the session. I'm hoping he wrote down some of those tips too. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody has questions, just a lot of happy gram feedback.
That's great. All right. Thanks very much, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.